We've reached the point in the season where some big favorites start to emerge in a lot of these markets. There's only 5 weeks for guys to make a case. Reminder that voters do not include playoffs for these awards. I just want to reiterate for people that some of these awards, not all of them, but some of them can swing wildly based on not necessarily play, but simple team wins and losses. Like I remember Brian Daboll coming back from what was it, like 20-1 or something insane to win coach of the year with like 3 or 4 weeks left. Even last year, I think Lamar Jackson was 6-1 or longer before he went nuts over the final 3-4 games of the season and won MVP. So there, I think from a play standpoint, maybe you don't have enough time to really make a case, but from a team level standpoint, you certainly do. And I think that's an important thing to think about as we talk about these awards here today. Let's actually start with coach of the year here today, because I think that is one of the most interesting ones and one of the most hard fought ones. We have Dan Campbell as the favorite here at plus 145, Kevin O'Connell, Mike Tomlin, Jim Harbaugh, Sean Payton, all in the mix also. I'll say this on Dan Campbell as the favorite. Obviously, if the Lions win out and they go 16-1, Dan Campbell's going to win it, right? What about 15-2 though, Ryan? What about 14-3? At what point do you think Dan Campbell no longer wins this award? Because to me, it's just straight wins and losses.
Yeah, I mean, we talk about a guy like this every year. A couple years ago was Kyle Shanahan, who went on a run and they finished 14-3. I definitely think 14-3 basically eliminates him. Maybe 15-2 still keeps him in the pile. Especially since he's well liked. If they don't lose a game from here, he probably does take it down. But I think the challenge they have coming with Buffalo is a tough one specifically.
Well, and I also think that the media likes Dan Campbell, right? He's a football guy. He's biting the knees. I think, and the Lions are such a great story after being so dead for so long, coming back now. He has a lot of the narrative stuff on his side too that maybe Kyle Shanahan didn't have. And I also think there's some disrespect for Lions talent. Like I think the Lions are an incredibly talented team, but the narrative out there is that maybe they're not as talented as those 49ers teams that Kyle Shanahan went 14-3 with. I don't know. But either way, there's certainly some tough games left. Thursday night against the Packers, I could see the Packers winning that game. Ryan mentioned the game against Buffalo coming up. I could see Bills obviously winning that game. Then their final 3 games for the Lions are at Bears, at Niners, versus Vikings. Theoretically, they should win all 3 of those. Obviously, crazy things can happen. So, Mark, what do you think about Dan Campbell as the favorite here and any other coach of the year thoughts?
I feel like this award generally goes to coaches of teams that kind of outperform expectations. And coming into the season, the Lions, were favored to win the NFC North, one of the NFC favorites overall, along with the 49ers. So I agree with you guys that if they win out, it's most likely to go to Dan Campbell. But I do think the Eagles have something to say about this as well. If the Eagles can end up the number 1 seed and the Lions only maybe lose 1 or 2 games down the stretch, but finish as the 2 seed, I think that hurts Dan Campbell quite a bit. So I'm still looking at coaches, kind of in the mid-range. We've talked about Jim Harbaugh and Mike Tomlin on previous shows. Those coaches and their teams have outperformed expectations, pretty mightily this season. Sean Payton on the board at 9-1, I also think is somewhat interesting. We'll talk about Bo Nix and his offensive rookie of the year, candidacy later in the show. But Sean Payton, I think that this Broncos team, they look pretty destined to make the playoffs at this point, and they were essentially left for dead coming into the season. Their offense, talent-wise, is really poor, compared to looking at some of the other teams around the league that are going to make the playoffs. So I think Sean Payton at 9-1 is someone I'm interested in adding to the portfolio at this point. I don't really have much interest in betting on Dan Campbell. I think Kevin O'Connell is, might be more of a favorite than Dan Campbell at this point, just given the expectations for the Vikings as well and what he's done with Sam Darnold. So I think, if adding to anything, I go Sean Payton, but otherwise, not much stands out to me on the board.
Okay. I 2 things. Sean Payton has a bye this week, which I don't think helps, right? Obviously. But then home against Colts, at Chargers, at Bengals, versus Chiefs. It's not likely, but you could see the Broncos winning out. And if they did so, I think that's probably what Sean Payton needs, Ryan, to win out. Maybe he can lose one of those games. And at that point, if you're just betting on the Broncos to win out, though, then you're just better off doing just bet them every week. Like you're going to get better than 9-1 if you just bet their money line every week or try to parlay it on look ahead lines or something like that anyway. So that's like, I don't know. I feel like he needs to win out. Oh, let's start there, and then I want to talk about Tomlin. What do you think about Sean Payton, Ryan?
I think they have to get in. I think of all the candidates we've Mark mentioned that the Broncos being in the spot they're in right now is the most surprising. Like you said, they have a pretty tough schedule run, so I could actually see it going the other way, where they go 2-2 or worse, 2-3. But if they get in, I think he definitely has a shot. He's a traditional candidate. No one saw this coming. I do like the idea of betting their money lines going forward, though. Especially, I think I'd rather do that than bet him straight up in the awards market currently.
Okay. Tomlin is the one that I have the most on in this market so far this season. And I still think the voters actually want Mike Tomlin to win this award. And I think he's very, very, very deserving. Also, some like lifetime achievement award stuff going on here, where he's been one of the best coaches in the league for a really long time. The problem, Ryan, is their schedule. At Eagles, at Ravens, versus Chiefs, 3 games in 11 days between weeks 15 and 17. The chances of them emerging from that 3-game window there at 3-0 or even 2-1 is a dog to me at this point. So I can't take Mike Tomlin at 6-1. If they can go 2-1 in that stretch, I still think he's live. It's just such a brutal stretch. So what do you think about Tomlin at this point down at 6-1?
I'm with you on this. When we first started awards market content at this company, I bet on Tomlin that year. They started 11-0, I think, and they bottomed out against a tough schedule late, and he lost to Kevin Stefanski. I could see the same thing happening here, where you said the lifetime achievement award. I think is the only thing where if there's one guy in the league that hasn't won one of these, where it's a crime he hasn't, it's certainly Tomlin, who's never had a losing season. But otherwise, I'm with you. I think they're losing at least 2 of those games.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't see a great bet here for me. I mean, you could say Nick Sirianni should get some credit for what the Eagles are doing. I don't think that he will. People think this guy's like kind of adult and not really doing anything for the Eagles, which I don't think is really fair to him, but whatever. I don't think that he can really win it, even though the Eagles have played absolutely unreal. He is 75-1. That was like the only one that even stood out a little bit to me. Any other coach of the year topics you guys want to hit on before we move on?
I have one. I think the Seahawks played the Cardinals this week, and Jonathan Gannon and Mike McDonald, you can get them both at 30-1. I think if you think one team's going to win that game, I think putting in a shot on them at 30-1's reasonable, especially if it's the Cardinals. The Cardinals have a really soft schedule to close out the year. But I do think this is a scenario where they end up coming in second or third. But again, at 30-1, I did it myself.
I mean, given the way that the 49ers have fallen off, one of these teams is pretty likely to win the division. And that's a pretty good accomplishment considering where they were supposed to be before the year. As Ryan mentioned, Jonathan Gannon's remaining schedule is Seahawks at home, Patriots at home, at Panthers, at Rams, versus 49ers. I mean, Cardinals could end on a 5-game winning streak, if they can win this week, to Ryan's point. And so 30-1, I think, is interesting there on Gannon. All right, let's move to MVP, where Josh Allen has emerged as a minus 280 favorite. And my $300 to win $45,000 on Derrick Henry is up in flames. I would have been better off with that on Saquon Barkley, who is now 5-1. And again, I don't even think it's that voters think Saquon's more valuable than Henry or anything else. It's just Ravens are 8-5. Eagles have only lost 2 games. That's it. And so a lot of this stuff, again, comes down to wins. The Bills are playing extremely good football. They don't have any stars at the pass catching position. You can see Josh Allen getting like all the credit here. So I actually think that Josh Allen deserves to be minus 280 at this point. That seems like the right price to me. Ryan, how are you thinking about MVP right now?
Yeah, I'm with you. He's again, to go back to the narrative of guys who deserve one. He's definitely the guy on the board here that deserves one. Josh Allen. I think it boils down to that Lions game coming up. If Buffalo beats them and Josh Allen hangs 4 touchdowns on them, like a bit like Jackson did against Miami last year late in the year, I think the award becomes his. For Saquon, he has to. A few things have to happen. 1, Buffalo needs to bottom out a little bit. 2, I think he needs at least 2,000 rushing yards. That seems to be a kind of a requirement for these things. And the third one, where I think if he breaks the single season record, then maybe he wins. And then I'm going to mention one guy that, if you look from a production standpoint at Josh Allen's year, Patrick Mahomes is not radically behind him in a lot of categories that matter, and he's 25-1, and his team only has one loss. I don't think they have the juice to put up enough offense over the next few weeks, but I haven't completely ignored him at his current price.
Yeah. So my concern with Mahomes is the narrative out there is that they have gotten lucky. And you know what? It's not a narrative.
True.
They have gotten lucky, right? So, like, how can you give the guy another MVP when it seems like they've just skated by and barely gotten there on blocked field goals and weird things happening at the end of games? So I'd be shocked, actually, if Mahomes won it here. I'd also be shocked if Barkley was able to overtake Josh Allen. Mark, any thoughts on MVP here?
Yeah, I do think if the Bills went out, then Josh Allen's a favorite, and completely agree with Ryan. It kind of lines up to the Lamar season last year, where it's not clear that there's an obvious favorite, and it's just kind of going with the best team, and then you need the quarterback to post one pretty dominant game down the stretch and to really solidify it. So I do think there are some interesting bets out there on the board, just because Josh Allen right now is numbers wise not having that typical MVP season. He's 14th in passing yards, and he's 8th among quarterbacks in rushing yards as well. So it's not even like he's having a dominant season on the ground. He is 6th in passing touchdowns and has 6 rushing touchdowns. So that definitely helps. And he also had that, passing and receiving touchdown in week 13 to kind of bolster the MVP case a little bit as well. So, looking at the board, I think the Saquon bet is honestly somewhat interesting. Just looking at the Eagles, if they were able to pass the Lions for the 1 seed in the NFC, he's really the only new player on that offense this season. They're averaging more than 2 points per game higher than last season. They have a higher yards per play than last season, and he could potentially get to 2,000 yards. So in a season where the quarterbacks aren't really standing out, we've kind of had the Ravens fall off. Lamar statistically has a much better season than Josh Allen at this point, but just record wise, I don't think he can get there. The Ravens also have a bye in week 14, so that's not ideal, and they have a tough schedule down the stretch. So I'm somewhat intrigued by Saquon. Do I think he's the most valuable player? No. But do I think he can get votes this season? Absolutely. So I think that is interesting. I'm curious, Adam, your thoughts on Saquon and if he could actually win this year.
So Christian McCaffrey didn't win it last year when he, I think, had a similar-ish season to what Saquon is doing. I think the 49ers fell off down the stretch last year. They lost that game to the Ravens. Brock Purdy went from the favorite to MVP to 4th choice or whatever very, very quickly. I guess you could see that happening here to Josh Allen. I mean, the signature play for both of Josh Allen and Saquon both have signature plays that these, dolty voters are going to think about. The reverse hurdle from Saquon that nobody has ever done on a football field before. And Josh Allen, of course, he's the MVP. He has to throw a touchdown to himself, and then he has that signature play also. I guess my question, Ryan, is if the Bills only lose 1 game, because I think they'll probably lose, or they have a good chance to lose at Detroit. But other than that, they play Rams, Patriots, Jets, Patriots. It's really hard for me to see the Bills losing to the Patriots or the Jets over the final 3 weeks. Really, really hard to see it. So I feel like at worst, they can go 3-2. The likeliest outcome is 4-1. And in, base case to me is 4-1. And then in some outcomes, they go 5-0, and at that point, it's like, man, minus 280 feels kind of short to me at that point. So I don't know. I don't think I have a bet for me in this market. But yeah, Ryan, what do you think if let's say the Bills lose 1 more game the rest of the way, only the Lions game? Do you think Josh Allen wins it?
Yeah, I think as long as the Buffalo remains as the 2 seed, which is going to take almost a disaster to not happen given their schedule, like you just said, and they have a path to overtaking the Chiefs because they have the tiebreaker on them. I do think he wins, and I think it's going to basically take him getting injured for that to not happen.
Okay. Any other MVP thoughts here before we move along? All right. Let's go to Offensive Player of the Year, which you guys know by now is code for Fantasy Football Player of the Year. Saquon Barkley is out to minus 470 in this market. And that's how you get, people are like, well, I'm not going to vote for a running back for MVP. I'm not going to be that fishy. So I'll just vote Saquon for Offensive Player of the Year. And that's what's going on in this market now. That's how you get out to minus 470. And again, I don't think that Saquon has been that much better than Derrick Henry this year, but the team is just better, period. So Ryan, where are you at on Offensive Player of the Year right now? You can get some long prices on guys right now with Saquon as minus 470 favorite if you like it.
Mark talked about this 2 months ago with Jalen Hurts, that the Eagles' schedule is just, very advantageous. It's just Barkley who's, putting up the big numbers. I do think, basically every awards voter would vote for him to win OPOY right now. But I do have one angle. I wrote it up in my article, and Mark mentioned this. Lamar Jackson, the default MVP last year, he's going to blow his statistics from last year out of the water if he doesn't get hurt this year, like out of the water. So if Barkley wins MVP or gets hurt, and we talked about this with Tyreek Hill last year, who had, was on pace for a record-setting season. He missed a couple games down the stretch. All of a sudden, Lamar Jackson is a deep long shot is very interesting because he could put up 40 rushing touchdowns, have 800 rushing yards. Like statistically, he could put up monster numbers. But as Mark mentioned before too, the team's success isn't there for MVP. So I think he's an interesting dart throw at the odds he has.
Yeah, 40 passing touches. I think Lamar's been way better this year than last year, which is crazy because he won the MVP last year. Mark, any thoughts on offensive player of the year?
Well, I thought, like, how can I leverage if Saquon Barkley wins the MVP? How can I leverage that into offensive player of the year? And when I was looking through historical winners, I was like disappointed to see that a lot of times players have won both MVP and offensive player of the year. The last 3 times a running back has won, they've won both. So that was Adrian Peterson, 2012, LaDainian Tomlinson, 2006, Sean Alexander, 2005. A couple quarterbacks have won both MVP and offensive player of the year as well. So that kind of makes me think, barring injury, that Saquon is almost a virtual lock for this award. So I probably will not be, putting a bet out at this point into this market. I think Saquon mostly has it locked up. They have a really easy schedule down the stretch. He should continue to smash. So once I learned that, the market got a little bit less interesting to me.
Yeah, for sure. And the injury point that Ryan made is well taken, though. Like, all you have to do is miss 2 games or 3 games. And we'll get to the J.K. Dobbins thing in a second here, which I am massively on tilt about. God, stay tuned to the end because I am massively on tilt. But anyways, all it takes is Saquon to miss 2 or 3 games here and everything flips. And so if you want to play into that, there are some extreme long shots here. I think the 50-1 on Lamar is at least notable there. Ravens remaining schedule by Giants, Steelers, Texans, Browns. Lamar would need to win all those games and have a big part of it, and Saquon get hurt. So it's a bit of a parlay there, but 50-1 is certainly interesting. All right. Anything else on offensive player of the year? Let's go to offensive rookie of the year. So I've taken Bowers at like different points in the season. I think I got like 35-1 at one point. Then he went down to like 15. Then he went back up to 25. I took a little more at 25. Then he went back to like 18. Then he went back to 30. I took a little bit more at 30. And so, like, I don't think he's going to win. But I just want to say, Brock Bowers, to any voters listening to this, I'm not pumping my bags. I am pumping my bags. Brock Bowers is on pace for 119 catches, 1,252 yards, and 5.5 touchdowns. As a rookie tight end, this is one of the greatest rookie seasons ever, let alone for a tight end. I mean, he's just absolutely smashing. Now, what's going to hurt him here, Ryan, is the team sucks, whereas Jaden Daniels and Bo Nix have their teams in a position, at least, to make the playoffs, and they are a huge reason why. And so it would be hard for me, if I'm being honest, it would be hard for me to vote for Bowers when Daniels and Nix have been so much more valuable. But if you told me that this award was just who has been the best raw player, I could make a case for Bowers over those guys. So right now we have Jaden Daniels minus 270 in the market, Bo Nix plus 230, Brock Bowers 10-1. Ryan, where are you at on offensive rookie of the year?
Yeah, we talk about this all the time. It doesn't matter who we think should win. It matters what voters are going to vote for. And rookie quarterbacks that headline playoff teams tend to win this race. That said, Adam, I'm with you 100% on Brock Bowers. The dude's leading the league in receptions right now. I mean, his quarterbacks are Gardner Minshew, Desmond Ridder, and Aiden O'Connell. Like, people, the Puka Nacua parallel is fine and it makes sense. But like, that dude played with Matthew Stafford. This dude's playing with guys where 2 of them might not be in the league in 2 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if I could vote for it, I would. And like you said, we got it, months ago at 35-1. So I'm not really in a hurry to get it at 10-1 right now. But I do think he has a shot. I definitely do.
I mean, one of Daniels or Nix is going to make the playoffs, right, Mark? And it's really hard for me to see voters not voting for a rookie quarterback with not that much talent around them, really, in either spot. Well, I mean, whatever you think about the talent around them, it's not elite. And these guys were a huge reason they made the playoffs. It's really hard for me not to see Daniels or Knicks winning this one at this point, sadly. Mark, what do you think about Offensive Rookie of the Year?
I agree with you in that regard, but I think the gap is a little too close. I think Jaden Daniels has had a much more impressive rookie season than Bo Nix. I mentioned the skill position group for the Broncos is not good earlier when talking about the Sean Payton Coach of the Year. It's also not good for Washington and Jaden Daniels, and they have nearly identical passing numbers, despite the fact that Jaden Daniels, left the game after basically a quarter due to that rib injury. He's battling through that rib injury, and then Jaden Daniels is absolutely icing Bo Nix in the rushing department. I think one thing that hasn't necessarily been talked about all that much is Bo Nix has basically stopped running the ball. In the last 4 games, he has a total of 9 rushing yards. Yeah. So it's pretty much all gone through the air for Bo Nix. And when he's matched up with Jaden Daniels, they're both going into their bye this week as well in week 14. I think Jaden Daniels is going to come out 100%. They have a really soft schedule down the stretch. They get at the Saints. They play Philly at home in week 16, which is obviously a really tough matchup. Then they close the season with the Falcons at home and at the Cowboys. So 3 of those 4 matchups I think are really soft and good for Jaden. So if anything, I might add a little bit to Jaden here as the favorite. Same as you guys. I have long shot Brock Bowers tickets, so I'm holding on to those and hoping they come through. But I actually think I might add some to Jaden here just because I think he is much more likely to win the award than Bo Nix.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting take for sure. And it's a pretty liquid market. I mean, and especially on minus money, you could probably get a decent amount down if you wanted to. The best price I see on Jaden Daniels to be Offensive Rookie of the Year is minus 220 right now on DraftKings. We're looking at minus 270 here on the screen for anyone watching on YouTube here at FanDuel. Again, make sure you shop these markets. There are some wildly different numbers across sites. So yeah, I think the Jaden, if I didn't have a bet in this market at all, I might go for Jaden Daniels minus 220. I think that's an interesting way to play it. Anything else on Offensive Rookie of the Year? All right. Defensive Player of the Year. Last time we did this show, I was like, maybe TJ Watt's too short. I think it was like minus 135 at that point, just leaning into how well the Steelers are playing this year and how people, want to give Steelers guys awards. Second now, I think would surprise people, Xavier McKinney at 17-1. And then the guy that I feel like is the one that everybody knows, like the voters all know, even casual fans at this point are like, Patrick Surtain, man, you don't want to throw on Patrick Surtain. Now, that Island game, Ryan, where the Broncos got lit up by Jameis is not good for Patrick Surtain's resume whatsoever here. And he's down to 18-1. Any thoughts on TJ Watt as the heavy favorite at minus 250 in Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, when we last talked about this, Watt was a bit behind in the sack category now. Trey Hendrickson still leads with 11.5, but Watt has 9.5. And on top of that, he has 5 forced fumbles, which leads the league. And splash plays matter in this race, always have. And like you said, Adam, the Steelers are a brand name. TJ Watt's a brand name. Him and Micah Parsons are probably the 2 biggest defensive stars in the league. So unless he gets hurt or someone else goes crazy at the end, I think he's coming away with this one.
Do you think, let's say the Steelers fall apart. They have 3 brutal games in 11 days. Let's say they lose all 3 of those. At that point, do you think that affects TJ Watt's candidacy, Ryan?
They definitely need to make the playoffs. But yeah, if they lose 3 games in a row and anyone else does anything, like if one of the Texans edge rushers has 3 sacks over that period, I think it becomes interesting in that scenario for sure.
Mark, any thoughts on Defensive Player of the Year?
I feel like it's kind of buying high at this point, but Leonard Williams has had a crazy stretch in the last couple of games. He has 4.5 sacks and a pick 6 for a defensive lineman against the Jets, like a 95-yard pick 6 as well. It was unbelievable for Leonard Williams this past weekend. And his prices vary a lot by book. I believe he's 65-1 on DraftKings and he's 35-1 on FanDuel. So I at least think the 65-1 is somewhat interesting. The Seahawks do have this massive game upcoming against the Cardinals, and their defense has gotten a lot better in the last few weeks under Mike McDonald. So I could see if they continue to make a push defensively and make the playoffs, win the division, and Leonard Williams continues his ascent. I think that is somewhat interesting, but I do think TJ Watt deserves to be the favorite here. The Steelers definitely have high profile games down the stretch of as you guys have alluded to. So it could go either way. Like if TJ Watt has big games in those high profile ones against the Chiefs and Ravens, then I think he pretty much locks it up. But yeah, if they lose, then it opens the door. So I think you're mostly betting on that more so than like the individual player statistics.
Yeah. Just again, how soft these markets are. You would not see in any other NFL market Leonard Williams 35 to 1 on FanDuel, and I'm seeing 60 to 1 now on DraftKings. Like, you just would never find that in any other market. Any other long shots here, Ryan? Because I do think that the Steelers could lose all 3 of those games and are pretty likely to lose 2 of them. And if TJ Watt is quiet and they lose 2 of them, you could see it. Do you think Surtain is done? Jalen Carter's been making some big waves lately for the Eagles defense, which I think everybody respects now as one of the best defenses in the entire league. Nick Benito, this dude went nuts in that game against Jameis, and they even mentioned it on the broadcast. They were like, Nick Benito making his case for Defensive Player of the Year. And, 99% of the country was like, who the hell is Nick Benito? But anyways, what do you think about any long shots here in Defensive Player of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, Benito has 11 sacks. Like you said, he did it when it counted last week too. I was going to mention Jalen Carter as well. If you're going to go down the board and, premium team, he's the best. I think he's the best defensive player on Philly too. They're going to finish strong as, Mark predicted 2 months ago. And then, Surtain's the brand name. Oddly enough, when it comes to corners and defensive backs, defensive touchdowns matter in this. So if he picks a pass off against, say, like the Bengals later in the season, I think that could factor in. And then you have the 2 guys, Kirby and McKinney, who lead the league with 7 interceptions for playoff teams. So, and they get a showcase game this Thursday night against each other.
By the way, Jalen Carter is 60 to 1 on MGM, 50 to 1 on DraftKings, and here 35 to 1 on FanDuel. So again, I mean, huge differences if you can shop this stuff. Mark, last guy I wanted to mention, I know you've been tracking the Chris Jones stuff, veteran, brand name for sure. Again, Chiefs have won a ton of games. I don't think voters are going to give them that much credit, though, for winning a ton of games, if that makes any sense. What do you think about Chris Jones here, 22 to 1?
Yeah, he finally got some sacks against the Raiders, but he's still lagging behind pretty decently in that department. He's only at 5, and the leader is up around 11 and a half at Trey Henderson. We have multiple guys at 10 and 11, so I think it's going to be tough for him to get there statistics wise. And yeah, the Chiefs defense has fallen off a bit despite them winning the last few games. So it's not, we were kind of betting in at 10 to 1, so 22 to 1 is a little better if you wanted to get in, but I'm not necessarily sure I want to.
Okay. Anything else on DPOY? Let's go to Defensive Rookie of the Year. This market has not changed that much, at least at the top, since we last talked. Jared Verse was around minus 145, I believe, last time we did this show. He's still minus 145 here on FanDuel. I think he's getting pressure from the Eagles guys because one of the best defenses in the league, and Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell have been a huge part of that. So Ryan, where are you at right now on Defensive Rookie of the Year?
Yeah, I mean, I say this all the time. I watch every game, so the idea that Jared Verse couldn't win this is preposterous to me. He's just, literally already one of the best edge rushers in the league. That said, Quinyon Mitchell in particular, we, a couple of years ago with Sauce Gardner versus Aiden Hutchinson. That's kind of the parallel I see here. I don't see it as Lattimore because Lattimore had splash plays and Sauce really didn't. So again, we've been talking about Philly finishing strong all year. No, people aren't targeting Mitchell. There is a little downside in the fact that 2 teammates, well, I guess it's true for the Rams too, but 2 teammates in the secondary are, among the favorites here. I ultimately think it ends up being Verse, but if the Rams bottom out, I could see Mitchell, especially with the more analytics heavy voters, Mitchell taking this.
Yeah, it's interesting. Mitchell is already earning a reputation as someone you don't throw at, right? And there's all these memes going around on Twitter, and believe me, all these voters are on Twitter. There's all these, graphics going around on Twitter. Here's what Quinyon Mitchell has done against number 1 wide receivers over the last 8 weeks. It's pretty impressive for sure, but you're only getting plus 165 here on Quinyon Mitchell. Mark, what do you think about Defensive Rookie of the Year?
I shouted out Quinyon Mitchell at 21 to 1 the last show we did, so I'm sitting on that and feeling pretty decent. Also, shout out the MAC again. We've got the MAC championship coming up this Saturday. Battle of the Bricks, Miami of Ohio against Ohio University. Absolutely got to tune in. Noon Eastern time. I got the Bricks behind me, so let's go Miami. But yeah, I think Jared Verse is actually a pretty great bet at this point. The sack numbers aren't there, but as Ryan mentioned, he's been just an unbelievable edge rusher. He's 5th in the NFL in pressures, and looking at the names around him, it's all Defensive Player of the Year candidates. So this is another market where, since I have the long shot on Quinyon Mitchell, I'm going to add in to Jared Verse right now at current prices. I do think I might sprinkle a little bit on Cooper DeJean as well for the for the reasons you guys mentioned, just teammates. And then Quinyon Mitchell also left their most recent game with a knee injury. It seems minor, but if he were to potentially miss any time, obviously Cooper DeJean steps in there. He has that tackle on Derrick Henry that everyone's been talking about. So I think just given the price here at 20-1, I'll probably add a little there in case he eats in to Quinyon Mitchell. But yeah, I do think Jared Verse is the clear favorite and probably priced a little short at this point. So I'm planning to bet that as well.
I kind of think that you might be able to get Verse shorter next week because they play the Bills this week, and assuming they lose this game, which I think, I didn't see what the line is yet, but they're going to be obviously dogs in this game. Maybe Verse goes down a little bit. Ryan, what do you think about that? Does win-loss on Verse really matter that much?
With the rookie of the years, it's not like a deal breaker like it is for just about everything else. But obviously, like for the Eagles, for instance, like it's not going to hurt. It's definitely going to boost your case. But yeah, I think that's sharp. He could dip, especially if Mitchell has another game where no one does anything against him.
Yeah. By the way, Chop Robinson, shout out Penn State in there as the third choice at the 20-1. Penn State also has another edge rusher coming in. I think he's going to be a top 10 pick. I think this dude, Abdul Carter, is just an absolute beast. Hopefully Penn State will win the national championship this year. Okay. Let's keep it moving here to, oh boy, here we go. Is this the last one? I think we've done them all. I mean, in comeback player of the year, I cannot win in this market. Every year I get rugged so hard. I swear J.K. Dobbins was the best bet of the year at 12-1, at 13-1, at 15-1. His story was so good. People are all the rah-rah on Harbaugh stuff. He was going to get him. He was going to push for this award. He was going to get him more stats down the stretch. And the story on J.K. Dobbins was so good. It's not some wrist injury for Joe Burrow or, Kirk Cousins is 40 and blew out his Achilles. So does everyone. J.K. Dobbins had been through hell, man. Been through hell and came back and been incredibly efficient and a huge part of a really good run-centric team. And now he's dusted. So, man, I hit the cash out. If you guys listen, I tell people never hit the cash out button ever. As soon as J.K. Dobbins went down, I hit the cash out button. I was like, I can't take it anymore. And they gave me like 60% of my money on the J.K. Dobbins stuff, even though I knew that he was going to go on IR and be out for 4 games and be dead to win this award. So I'm on massive tilt. I don't even want to look at anything else. You guys need to talk about it. Joe Burrow is minus 210 now. Joe Burrow has been unreal this year. I think borderline one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL this year. The defense has been atrocious, so he can't win anything else except comeback of the year. So I understand why he's minus 210. Ryan, what do you think about comeback player of the year now that we know J.K. Dobbins is dusted?
First, ladies and gentlemen, that is exactly how you use the cash out option, is during live events. When you're going to lose and you get something back, I do that myself. The Burrow thing's kind of unprecedented in recent years because, like you said, if they're 8-4, he might be the MVP favorite right now. But they're 4-8, and generally speaking, team success matters in this race. So I guess they kind of have to give it to him if he keeps this up. But that's definitely not the norm. Then when I look at the rest of this market, Kyler Murray, I don't think he counts. He played last season. Kirk Cousins, he played so poorly last week, he should be deported.
Mm-hmm.
Anthony Richardson, I don't think he counts. DeMar Hamlin, I do think his story maybe keeps him in play. Sam Darnold, we discussed this a couple weeks ago, about a month ago. He shouldn't count. Russell Wilson doesn't count. Don't think Herbert counts. Don't think Bryce Young does. Then we have Nick Chubb, who's like the alternative J.K. Dobbins. So to me, it's Burrow or Hamlin, more or less.
Yeah. It's crazy how some folks don't even offer this market because it's so confusing. Kyler came back and played last year. He shouldn't be eligible, and he's the second choice. Kirk Cousins is about to get benched for put Penix in, and he's the third choice. You know what I mean? So this market is so soft every year, and I can't win in it. It is absolutely tilting. Mark, what do you think about comeback player of the year?
I just agree with you guys that looking at the board, there's absolutely no one I want to bet on. I don't even think they're eligible to win, essentially based on having to come back from injury or just not sucking. So I think Burrow should be the prohibitive favorite here. It's certainly a weird market. I will say on Kirk Cousins, he was the massive favorite just a couple weeks ago. Obviously, he had a horrible game, but at 9-1, like, I think that is, I guess, okay, just because he did come back from a more major injury on the Achilles. They have a somewhat soft schedule down the stretch. They get the Vikings this upcoming week, which sounds like a disaster for Kirk Cousins' current state of mobility. But then they play the Raiders, Giants, Commanders, which is somewhat tough, and then the Panthers to close it out. So three of the 4 games down the stretch are at least somewhat soft. Maybe he can reclaim some statistics there, but it really seems to me like Burrow is going to end up running away with this one.
Destiny Miller, who works with us on the CS team, just sent me a note as we're recording this. She said, "Did you record the awards pod yet? If not, please reaffirm on the pod that betting Russell Wilson for comeback player of the year is not just a laundry bro bet, but a completely viable way to use my money." I have bad news, Destiny. I don't think Russell Wilson's eligible really for the award based on the new criteria, right? He would be coming back from sucking. And they, again, you could vote for him, but Rob Mahdi of the AP, who runs the voting, informed the voters, listen, guys, this is not the spirit of the award. We're not supposed to vote for guys who are coming back from sucking only. They're supposed to be coming back from something like Hamlin was, or Burrow was, or Cousins was, or J.K. Dobbins was, etc. So I'm sorry, Destiny. I know you're a big Steelers fan, but you have, in fact, torched your money on Russell Wilson. I'm sorry. Okay. Anything else here on comeback? All right. I think we hit all of them. Did we not?
We did.
Perfect. All right. This will likely be the last awards show we do for the year. This is so fun. Even though I get tilted about it, it's so fun to bet the awards markets through the year. I find it so interesting. And again, super soft, just as you can tell by how the discrepancy across books here. So hopefully you guys have enjoyed this all year. Ryan is going to continue with the column, I assume, Ryan, through the end of the season here to keep people updated on his thoughts. Be sure to check that out every other week on establishtherun.com. Ryan, tell the people where they can find you and they can find your work.
I'm at Ryan Reynolds NFL on Twitter, which I actually use now, to the point Adam called me a thread bro, which will haunt me for the rest of my days.
No, Ryan is doing it right. He's using a thread, but not in the thread bro kind of way. Absolutely love Ryan's threads. Be sure you're following him on Twitter. Mark, tell the people where they can find you.
I'm at Mark Dank on Twitter. I feel like we've given out some good long shots on this one. So if you guys have tickets out there, and I'd love to sweat along with you guys. So feel free to tweet at me, at us, any outstanding tickets, and we can sweat down the stretch together.
All right. Will be a fun end of the season for Ryan, for Mark, for producer Ryan, for producer Luke. I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.